Good morning and welcome to Chicago Women in Philanthropy's annual meeting. My name is Sarah Borgeson and I serve as Senior Director, Institutional Giving and Principal Gifts at Shirley Ryan Ability Lab.
And my name is Kawa Mitchell and I serve as the Senior Program Officer on the Chicago Commitment Team at the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation.
As co-chairs of the CWIP Board of Directors, we're thrilled to have you with us today as we celebrate this year's accomplishments and recognize our fellow CWIP members for their numerous contributions. Due to COVID-19, we postponed our annual luncheon, which is traditionally held in March. However, we did not want to miss the opportunity to honor Barbara Bowman, our 2020 Making a Difference Award honoree. And because of the complex compounding challenges women and girls face during these times, we've gathered together a live panel who will share wisdom with us on women's leadership, education, and family in conversation with special personal messages from Joan Harris and Barbara Bowman.
For those of you who are new to CWIP, we are an all-volunteer organization of over 300 members from across the nonprofit and philanthropic sectors. CWIP's mission of bringing diverse voices together at the same table results in exceptionally honest, supportive, and rich conversations, as well as a sense of connectedness and personal fulfillment, and a stronger, more inclusive philanthropic sector.
We're entering a momentous year as this is CWIP's 40th anniversary. Together, you all have made CWIP a community where we gain strength and new insights from each other, a place where we model bravery and authenticity through our leadership, and where we can all feel seen and heard. A few words about CWIP's fiscal health. Thanks to your support and to our continuing success with both the annual luncheon and sold out year-round programming, we're ending this year with a large surplus and very healthy reserves. Certainly something to be celebrated in these tough times. A special thank you today to our event sponsor, Quarles & Brady, and to our leadership sponsors, Allstate, Comcast, Crown Family Philanthropies, and the Irving Harris Foundation. You can find a complete list of sponsors on the screen and on CWIP's website. Thank you again for your tremendous support.
CWIP is committed to promoting racial equity through its values and programming. Because of your support today, we'll be able to continue to intentionally focus resources on hiring skilled facilitators, including women of color, and compensating them fairly so that we can have meaningful discussions and forge solutions together. We do this by offering programming that we believe is unique and insightful. Our committees work hard to intentionally create opportunities for critical dialogue so that everyone has a voice. The long work of equity is certainly not new, but CWIP is committed to continuing to elevate our role as a foundational resource for the philanthropic sector. I'm thrilled that CWIP has committed to this journey, and I'm incredibly proud of what we have been able to accomplish thus far. It gives me great pleasure to be a member of this organization, along with so many of you who are committed to our sector and our community. Thank you for being with us today.
At this time, we'd like to hand off the program to Deborah Walker-Johnson and Jackie Davidoff, who are CWIP's incoming co-chairs. They'll announce the new slate of officers and board members. Thank you again for being with us today.
Hi, I'm Jackie Davidoff, Principal of Davidoff Strategy and outgoing co-chair of CWIP's Racial Equity and Social Justice Committee, and here with Deborah Walker-Johnson to welcome you to the new leadership for CWIP, and particularly to thank and acknowledge our executive committee and incoming board for our new year. So our executive committee includes Sarah Borgensen of Feeding America, Gwen McNutt, Compass Foundation, Paula Mitchell, MacArthur Foundation, and our board, Claire Butterfield of the Christopher Family Foundation, Ashley Friend, Karenina Grimble of the Illinois Department of Human Services, Venu Gupta, Mother Jones, Sarah Holliday, Ounce of Prevention, Donna Jacobson, McCormick Center for Early Childhood Leadership, Marks, Quarles and Brady, Jennifer Mitchell, Year Up, Carolyn Nopar, Chicago Fundraiser Accelerator, Marika Ramos, Evanston Cradle to Career, and Frida Warren, Year Up. We are better as an organization for your service to us, and our vision as a board is that you are better because of the ways you have grown and expanded as leaders in serving this organization. Thank you.
Hi.
Introduce CWIP co-chair.
So thanks, Jackie. At this time, I'd like to recognize all of our committee volunteers for the countless hours they've contributed to making this another successful year for CWIP. As we have learned, this year has been all about adapting and innovating. We thank our committee members for their commitment to CWIP and our co-chairs for their leadership during these turbulent times. Our committee co-chairs are, from our program and capacity building, Sarah Holliday and Alexis Allegra. From our girls committee, Gwen McNutt and Claire Butterfield. From our racial equity and social justice committee, Kristen Heddick and Tasasha Henderson. From our membership committee, Lindsay Moorman and Frida Moore. And from WLMP, Donna Jacobson and Glennis Hokinson. Our annual luncheon committee, Ashley Friend, Paula Danoff, and Patricia Marks. And our communications committee, Karenina Grimble and Venu Gupta. Thank you to our committee chairs for their leadership. So additionally, each year we ask our committee co-chairs to nominate a committee member to honor at the annual meeting in appreciation of their commitment to carrying out CWIP's mission and vision. And this year's honorees are from our luncheon committee, Ann Wilson from La Rabida Children's Hospital. Ann is receiving this award because of her years of hard work and leadership to help grow the annual luncheon. Ann's tireless efforts helped to grow CWIP's annual luncheon attendance by 40% and to raise more than $200,000 to support CWIP's program. From our Girls Committee, Cheryl Collins from Holy Family Ministry Centers. Cheryl has been a reliable and supportive member of the CWIP Girls Committee since the beginning. She is deserving of this award because she is generous with her time, brings her knowledge and valuable resources to the committee, and is a wonderful advocate for girls. From our Program and Capacity Building Committee, Jackie Lawrence Harris from Chicago Lights. Jackie brought enthusiasm and creativity to her leadership role for two highly successful programs last year, Money Matters and Leadership in the Times of Transition. From our membership committee, Savannah Boren from JP Morgan Chase. Since joining the committee, Savannah has consistently volunteered to support our committee's efforts and bring thoughtful ideas to the table on how to best engage the membership in this new virtual environment. We are grateful for the time and energy that she has invested in the committee over the past year, and we are lucky to have her as a part of the committee. Alex Cornwell from Chicago Lights. Alex has been active has been an active committee member from the beginning. She continually steps up to the plate to support and help guide programming wherever support is needed. And we are so appreciative of her perspective, initiative, and calm presence when things get busy. From WLMP, Belinda Moore from the Skinner Foundation. Over the past year, Belinda has tirelessly served WLMP on the Education and Evaluation Subcommittee and has done so with generosity and grace. Belinda has always stayed positive and continues to be committed to our program despite having faced many personal challenges, including caring for loved ones with very serious medical issues. She is an inspiration. So, congratulations to all of our honorees, and thank you again to all of our committee members. We simply could not have had the impact without your help. And now, Sarah Borgensen will introduce our 2020 Making a Difference Award honoree.
Now we come to the presentation of our Making a Difference Award. Each year, CWIP honors a leader of Chicago's nonprofit and philanthropic communities who has made a significant contribution to elevating the voices of women and girls in society. This year, as the board discussed who we'd like to honor in light of CWIP's commitment not only to women and girls, but also to racial equity, Barbara Bowman's name immediately came to mind. Many of you know Barbara and have been inspired by her story, her tremendous accomplishments, and the challenges she's overcome. Barbara Bowman is a trailblazer, a pioneer in early childhood education, as well as an advocate, professor, author, and internationally renowned expert on childhood development. She was born and raised on Chicago's South Side, and her experience learning and working both across the country and around the world has shaped her understanding of how young children learn. Bowman, together with businessman and philanthropist Irving B. Harris, founded the Erikson Institute in Chicago in 1966. In addition to her leadership at Erikson, Bowman served as Chief Officer for Early Childhood Education for the Chicago Public Schools, and during the first term of former President Barack Obama, she served as consultant to the U.S. Secretary of Education. Even now, at age 91, she continues to work to strengthen programs for young children and families in Chicago, as well as writing, presenting at conferences, addressing issues such as the cradle to prison pipeline, and the need for systemic changes to ensure equitable opportunities for low-income and minority children. She also continues to teach graduate students as the Irving B. Harris Professor of Child Development and serves as co-principal investigator of a project aimed at improving child-parent centers across 3 states. Throughout her illustrious career, Bowman has maintained a dedication to thinking critically and encouraging her students to do the same, as well as a steadfast commitment to equality and social justice for children and families. I know I speak for the entire CWIP board and for everyone in this meeting when I say we're thrilled that Barbara has accepted this award. Introducing our honoree is Joan Harris, who is our honorary chair. Joan Harris is the past president and chair of the Irving Harris Foundation, a trustee of the Library of Congress Trust Fund Board, and in 2014 received the National Medal of Arts from President Barack Obama. Most recently, she was honored by her alma mater, Smith College, with the Smith Medal. She has served as president, chair, director, and trustee for many Chicago and national cultural organizations, including the Aspen Music Festival, the Juilliard School, the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and the League of American Orchestras. Mrs. Harris served on the President's Commission for the National Endowment for the Arts. She was Commissioner of the Department of Cultural Affairs for the City of Chicago. It's through her leadership at Harris Theater for Music and Dance that small performance companies have a permanent site which to perform. Please enjoy these inspiring messages from Joan Harris and Barbara Bowman.
I'm Joan Harris, and I'm speaking to you from my home in Michigan, far, far away from Chicago and from all of you. Nevertheless, it's a great pleasure for me to have the opportunity to introduce you to my friend Barbara Bowman. If I had to choose one word to describe Barbara Bowman, it would be this: grace, or maybe the word would be elegance or hospitable. The Bowman home was for many years the site of the graduation ceremony of the Erikson Institute. Accustomed to auditoriums filled with graduates and adoring families, I was so moved during my first Erikson graduation, which occurred not in a vast auditorium, but in the garden of the Bowman home. The graduation was a family affair, with no pomp, but loaded with circumstances of pride and warmth. The graduates received their diplomas laced with pride and appreciation for a job well done. Barbara has always been a role model for me. I knew from my late husband, Irving Harris, of her vision and determination in getting the school built and getting the job done. She made her mark then and continued to do so by being the creative and humanizing force behind the school. Generations of graduates owe much to Barbara for guiding them through the difficult challenges of matriculating at Erikson. It has always been a source of pleasure that I've been able to count Barbara and her husband Jim as my friends, and later on that I became a friend of their daughter, the spectacular Valerie Jarrett. Nothing could give me more pleasure and more pride, even from this distance, than to have the opportunity to introduce Barbara and to thank her for setting the bar so high. For all of us who love and admire you, Barbara, I present my virtual friend, Barbara Bowman, to all of you. Thank you.
I am so honored to receive this award from the Chicago Women in Philanthropy. I'm old enough to remember when women's lives were seriously constrained, not only by institutional and legal limitations, but also by the limited social support systems available. It was not easy in those days to find someone to talk to about one's ambition, about planning a career, about dealing with criticism and discrimination in the workplace, and about the public's disdain for your choice to work. I belonged to that generation that married as soon as you finished college, if you finished, and I was engaged at 18 and married at 21. Babies were supposed to follow right away, and I remember my mother, who was a college graduate herself, being concerned about the 6-year hiatus between my marriage and my pregnancy, and my decision to spend more time in schooling and work. A brief experience working as a young woman was okay, but it was to end as soon as the baby was born. I was breaking the mold in a number of ways, and it was a pretty lonely feeling. My choice of a husband, however, was gifted. Although neither of us knew enough about the world or marriage to make a rational choice, it turned out to be lucky for both of us. For the next 61 years, he was my support system, encouraging me to accept new opportunities and helping me navigate new challenges. He gave me the emotional and, equally important, the financial support to pursue my interests. In a field that is notoriously underpaid, both forms of support were essential. I regret to say my observation over the years is that happily married couples are probably the exception rather than the rule. With changing times, I would not have wanted either my daughter or my granddaughter to marry so young on the chance they would find a similarly supportive spouse. While it's distressing that we still need to address equity for women, it is wonderful that now we have organizations like the Chicago Women in Philanthropy. It makes a difference to have colleagues and mentors to open doors and mediate stress as we try to advance our personal and institutional opportunities. I've had a long and mostly satisfying career. When I began in early childhood 70 years ago, we were just beginning to understand that young children could see and hear and feel. A surprising number of adults thought early experience didn't matter since children didn't remember them. We now know that children remember early experience by how their brains develop and how and what they learn. Researchers and educators have supplied overwhelming evidence that instead of the first 6 years being a time of little importance, it plays an enormous role in what humans become. Equally important, researchers have shown the relationship of early childhood practices to child outcomes. The kinds of experiences we provide for children before they go to school affects not only their future, but the future of all of us. I've spent much of my professional career trying to get this message out, encouraging people to act on it. Today, many adults say they understand that early childhood is an important time of life and that young children need high-quality care and education programs. They also support underwriting early childhood programs, particularly for low-income and children with special needs. Yet despite our overwhelming approval of early childhood programs, we still fail to support them adequately. It's not that early childhood programs have not grown significantly since the early 60s. It is our failure to adequately plan and fund such programs that keeps me and other advocates dissatisfied. For example, the pervasiveness of developmental research led to the establishment of Head Start, a program to address generational poverty. The program recognizes the seriousness of the achievement gap for low-income children, but does not fund programs for all eligible children. Therefore, many children who live in segregated communities and attend poverty schools do not have the skills and knowledge they need. They go into kindergarten unprepared and are candidates for school failure by third grade. The gap in their achievement compared to other groups is so serious because it affects not only school failure, but crime and incarceration, unemployment and underemployment, premature parenting, and other social ills. Recently, Head Start has increased the educational qualifications of their teachers in hopes of increasing readiness of low-income students. However, even now, Head Start is not a major player in addressing the achievement gap. 20 years after Head Start began its slow increase, childcare expanded rapidly in response to the explosion of women in the workforce. Many people are rightly concerned with providing care for children so their parents can get to work and young children are safe and in responsive environments. Most states have enacted health and safety standards to ensure minimum care. However, state standards leave child caregivers underpaid, often at minimum wage, with few or no benefits. Few professionals see child care as a career opportunity, and the absence of caregiver training and academic standards keeps quality low. While these conditions jeopardize the development of many children, they are particularly hazardous for children of color and for children from low-income families. Many of these children also need the basics of education if they are to achieve in school, and many child care programs do not provide the high-quality preschool education they need. I think the problem is we've not made clear the distinction between care and education, both of which are essential, but not exactly the same thing. We need to provide enough high-quality programs so that all children are in safe and responsive environments. But we also need to see that all children arrive in school ready to succeed. Thank you for recognizing my work on behalf of young children. I'm proud of what we have accomplished, but as you can see, there's more work to do if we're to have an equitable society. Let me thank you again for your work. The essential support you are providing for women is important for the women, but it is also important for their children. Thank you.
Wow, what an inspiring and enduring legacy we have in Barbara Bowman. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce this morning's panel moderator who will tie this all together with our current context, Felicia Davis. Felicia is a lifelong Chicagoan and self-described girl from the South Side. She is deeply committed to community through inclusive service to others. Davis has spent her entire professional career in the public sector with a record of accomplishments in public policy, higher education administration, and public service through various capacities. For her, the transformational idea of being a social change agent coexists with a deep awareness of the practical realities facing our society. Felicia believes profoundly in the power to transform lives, families, and whole communities through collective efforts, and that advancing equality and equity in society are causes worth fighting for. As president and CEO of Chicago Foundation for Women, she leads their strategic efforts in investing in women and girls as catalysts for fighting for gender equity, and building strong communities for all. Felicia, it's my pleasure to turn it over to you.
Tawa, thank you for that tremendous introduction, and I am honored to join you all here today. Chicago Women in Philanthropy, thank you for the invitation, and I am eager to dig into this conversation and to really discuss equity, education, family, and working women. We have three really tremendous panelists, and I can't wait to dive in. So what I want to do is to refer you to their full bios in the program documents, and I will bring them into the room by way of introduction by asking them our first question, which is really a grounding question, and it's meant to give you a different view of who they are as individuals. I will start with Dara Munson, who is the CEO of the Child Care Society. And Dara, my question to you, and I know, so I follow you on social media, and I know you have a hashtag Joy Magnet. So my first question to all of us is, what's giving you joy right now, Dara?
Good morning, Felicia, and I just want to begin by saying thank you to CWIP for this really amazing opportunity. I think what is so powerful about this moment is when women gather, it's an amazing sense of energy, and I really appreciate being here and really on the heels of the video of Barbara Bowman and Joan Harris. So to answer your question, what brings me joy? Honestly, in 2020, it depends on the day, right? Some days I get joy out of getting out of the bed able-bodied and of sound mind with my mental faculties in order. And I say that in all honesty because I'm honoring and just holding space for what we are all dealing with. On my best days, really what brings me joy is seeing the work that I do for the benefit of future generations, but seeing it through the eyes of, on one hand, my now 22-year-old daughter, who is amazing, and I've really tried to raise her to be a peerless and brave soul, and seeing her grow into that brings me an immense amount of joy. And that's also bookended by my nephew, who just turned 1, who also happens to be my godson, and really understanding that the work that I'm able to do will not only impact where we are today as a society, but their future lives, and really wanting that to be the foundation. And paying attention to my spirituality, my faith, those things that support that foundation, those things that I think that we can only do for ourselves, and understanding how to ensure that I wrap myself with a fierce self-love, are those things that bring me joy. So good days and bad days, and just holding space in the middle for it all.
Dara, thank you for that. I know we all have had those moments, and you're right, it depends on the day. Tracie, I am coming to you next, the fearless, amazing leader of the American Library Association. And I happen to know, Tracie, because we are also friends outside of the virtual space, but that you had the opportunity to watch robins hatch, something that you would not have been able to do while you've been in remote shelter in place. But besides seeing birds on your windowsill, what's giving you joy these days, Tracie?
Yes. So first of all, I just want to just honor this moment to be here today with all of you is extraordinary. I want to thank everyone for the invitation, and I definitely want to pay homage to the great Barbara Bowman and also Joan Harris. I was thinking when I heard them speaking, what role models they set in terms of institution building for us all. And I also note that Ms. Bowman took the opportunity of receiving the award to continue to advance her agenda on behalf of young people. She wastes no time. And I think the thing that brings me joy, and that is bringing me joy, even in this period, is connection and community and memory. Thinking about my own family and thinking about people like my grandmother who passed when I was still in my very early 20s. I've been as I've been able to spend more time at home than I think I have since I was maybe my early years of college, because I did a lot of traveling as well throughout college, and a lot of my adult professional life has found me on the road a lot. So being able to be at home, I find that I am doing some of the things that I noted my grandmother and my mother doing. Sewing, I love to sew, designing, decorating, all those kinds of things. And so working with my hands, creating, reading, of course, I am a librarian. And so the fact that I have access to knowledge, that I have access to the internet is something that I don't take for granted, because there are so many people, so many children, so many adults who don't have the privilege that we're enjoying today. So I think service to community and family continue to be the things that not only bring me joy, but that's where I find my resilience.
Tracie, thank you so much for that reminder. And I can see already the connection to family both you and Dara have brought into this space. Sheerine, the co-founder and co-director of Healing to Action, and I happen to know, if we're on the family thing, that you actually have an early learner in your home. And so, Sheerine, I will ask you to come into the space and to share what's bringing you joy right now.
Thank you so much, Felicia. It's such an honor to be here with all of you. Thank you for having me and for having Healing to Action as part of this conversation. Yes, so more of the same. I think that family is everything for me right now. What's particularly bringing me joy is that my 2-year-old finally has a friend. We've been, sort of in isolation for quite a while, and we started a pod with another family. So he has a 1-year-old friend, and it's just been absolutely joyful to watch them learn how to be human together. Two individuals who have no idea what's going on out in the world, who are just trying to learn how to do things like share and learning what empathy means, and that's been so beautiful to watch, and just reminding. I think, as Barbara Bowman said, those early years are sacred. They're a time where so much is happening that maybe we're missing, and so it's been joyful to give some space and attention to that, and to really breathe that in and take that in. Another thing that's giving me a lot of joy are the leaders that we work with at Healing to Action. So we organize survivors of gender-based violence to develop solutions to gender-based violence that are rooted in their own experiences and wisdom. as survivors. And during the pandemic, it has been so humbling to see some of the leaders that we work with and what they're doing, how they're serving as lifelines in their communities. One example that comes to mind is one of our leaders who was out of work as a result of the pandemic, was struggling a lot personally, but who ended up housing housing a survivor in her community, who needed a place to stay. There were a lot of issues, particularly at the beginning of the pandemic, with finding safe housing. And when I think about that, I just think about, who among us in that moment, when there was so much uncertainty and so much danger and fear, would do that. And so thinking about the word that Joan used, the word grace, and the grace of our leaders, and how they're moving in their communities, how they're moving towards a better world, even in this really difficult moment, is a huge source of light and strength for me right now.
Thank you, Sheerine. And I will have to say, if I have a keyword for 2020, it would probably have to be grace, followed probably by resilience. But I do want to link to something that Mrs. Bowman said in her speech. And we think back, and one of the things that I find, particularly with younger women, is that we're not always aware of how short lived these gains have been and lifetime. And so going back to Mrs. Bowman at the beginning of her career, and a lot of the women we know and work with, our mothers, our grandmothers, that when they started out, it was go to college, perhaps, graduate, perhaps, but certainly get married was the intent and have children right away. That was the expectation. And earlier this year, before the pandemic hit, so in January, Time magazine had an article headline: Women had exceeded men in the workforce. So women had overcome men in the workforce. 50.4% of the workforce was comprised of women. Obviously, the pandemic has had a significant impact on that. But as you think about that, as we think about our ability to work, as I think about all of you as leaders, and how you navigate those spaces, and the adding factor of the intersectional identities that each of us represents when we come into those spaces, can you each talk to me a little bit about work, what it means for you, and how you show up with your full intersectional self and work? And this time, I'll go to Tracie, Sheerine, and then to Dara, please. Tracie.
All right. Thank you so much. Well, first of all, I think the idea of women in work is really loaded, as I think that women's labor often goes undetected, unnoticed, unnoted, unheralded. And so I think that when we show up in the workplace, we have to fight off these ideas of what it means to be in a place where sometimes merit or the idea of accomplishment, or who is able in terms of to have certain types of characteristics or to demonstrate certain types of leadership characteristics is very gendered, right? So I think for me, one of the things that I think a lot about is that I grew up largely with my grandparents, and spent a lot of time in my grandparents' household. And my grandmother, I think, was she did a lot of the work inside of the home, and she did a lot of real household management. And I say that because, I think one of the reasons why I became a librarian and also became an arts and culture administrator is because both of my grandparents really did a lot with craft, but neither of them had a pronounced formal education. So my grandmother went to ninth grade in 3-year increments. So she went to the 3rd, 6th, and 9th grade because she was one of 12 children. So in the alternating years, she was working on the farm. My grandfather went to the 3rd grade. And so literacy was something that they really battled. So it really meant that my grandmother was slightly more literate than my grandfather was. And so she managed things like bills, and that. My grandfather worked outside. My grandmother and my grandfather had both been domestics when they were very young. So I show up, I think, in my career, I think I've shown up with that legacy of a family that have worked very hard, that valued labor, that had worked in places where maybe their labor was taken for granted or their labor was or undercompensated. So I bring a lot of that, and then I bring a lot of the packaging, right? So the way that people read me, showing up as a Black woman, a lot of times in leadership positions, I was the youngest, the first person of color to hold maybe a significant leadership position, etc. And I think in some ways that's given me an advantage because I believe that there are various uses of power. There's various types of power. And I think a lot of the power that I've been able to draw from and to even exert is the power of the margins, right? The power of being able to say, when I step into the door, people are already going to count me out. They're going to take me out for the count. If I speak, they're going to say things like, "Oh, you're so articulate." If I seem to be really strategic in my thinking, "Oh, well, where did you get that idea? Or who did you learn that from?" Or, and I could go on and on. But for brevity's sake, I think, um, the way that I have sort of navigated work is instead of lamenting the the I think the propensity that people have to maybe marginalize or want to marginalize my work or even my authority or even my expertise. I've tried to work that actually in my favor. And I do think that there's a lot of power. I'm a writer too and an artist, and artists are all the time using the space, the margin, that space. They're using that to really do a lot of critique, and I think to do a lot of resistance work, and also I think to and this is where I'll end. I think to give voice to others that are in the margins, and a lot of my leadership has really been about doing that work, like really trying to stand in the gap for others like me who are often discounted.
Tracie, I love that example. I love that, and I can visualize you coloring outside of the line, right? Like if you had a sketchbook, the way in which that you would use that sketchbook, probably perhaps not even in the center, but start on the outside and fill it in. Beautiful mosaic. Sheerine, you are a co-founder and a co-director and a leader, and that's a different leadership model. And so, can you talk to me a little bit about that for you as well?
Sure. And thank you so much, Tracie, for sharing the story, especially the story of your family, because it just got me to thinking how generational our identities are, all the stories that we hold before we even get into our leadership or get into our own work. I think about my own grandmother who grew up in Iran, um, and that she was in school, and she was actually pulled out of school because she was getting harassed on her way to school. And so the way that the family thought was the best to handle that was to pull her out and to take away her education, not allow her to finish her education. So these are just stories that you hold, that you realize that are motivators for you, that take you where you end up needing to be. In terms of being a co-founder, I was also really just struck by Barbara Bowman's explanation of how she started out, and how she was breaking the mold, I think is the way that she put it. For me, I decided that I wanted to start Healing to Action with my co-founder Carla Altmeyer about 5 years ago, and we are both younger women, women of color. I was coming into the goal with significant student loan debt. I was really interested in starting a family pretty immediately, and so all of those things to me made me sit in a lot of fear that I was trying to move into a world that wasn't built for me, that everything that I was actually an obstacle to actually being a co-founder, to actually being a social entrepreneur, starting something from scratch, trying to build an institution from the ground up. And it only was over time that I realized that those experiences, those identities that I was bringing into it could actually shape my vision, could form, the underpinnings of my work and what I wanted to do. But in that moment of fear, I think one of the things that was so critical was that I had a partner, that I had someone I could share leadership with, that I had someone that I could, take that jump together with. And I think initially we thought about it. I mean, we knew what we wanted to do. We knew that we loved this work and we were going to take the risk, but we were relying on each other. There was an interdependence there because we both felt that we needed that in order to both achieve our professional dreams and also to achieve our personal dreams and our personal goals. And we ended up each getting pregnant very quickly into the founding of the organization. Carla came to visit me when I had just given birth, and she was, she said to me, "Guess what, Sheerine? There's another one on the way." And so we went through that together. I remember getting ready for a very important meeting with an interview with a potential funder for Healing Action. It was a fellowship opportunity, and I remember somebody that had the fellowship telling me as I was preparing, because I was 7 months pregnant at the time, telling me, "You need to prepare because they're really going to be wondering, what was she thinking? Why would she have done that?" And so having those kinds of experiences, having someone that I could share those experiences with and unpack them with, coming up with a political analysis around why is this happening, was so important. And I think that what started as a survival strategy or, a resilient strategy for us turned into a political strategy. We realized that it wasn't just about, making it through. And this is sort of the underpinning of our organization, which is that we bring survivors together because it's healing, and it's wonderful to be able to unpack and see that collective experience that people are bringing into the space. But really, over time, people come together to survive, but they stay together to win. They stay together because they want to build that collective power, and they want to figure out ways of dismantling those underlying attitudes and social conditions that make them fear stepping into their power in the first place.
Sheerine, thank you. That person saying that to you around your pregnancy, I mean, it also, there was a time when if you became pregnant or when you became pregnant, you were expected, in some instances prohibited from working altogether, certainly expected not to work further. And I know that that's something that probably pulls at all of us. For me personally, I remember thinking at different times, was I doing the right thing by working? Was I doing should I have been, I think that's constant struggle of a working mother. Is this the right thing to do, or should I have been at home? Is that the right thing to do? And I have 4 sons and 1 daughter, and my daughter is 30 now. And I had asked her years ago, and she said to me, "Mom, are you kidding me? The best thing that you did for all of us was to work and to show us all of the different, parts of you. So thank you for, continuing the work and pushing forward, even though, I mean, all of us really, but even though Sheerine in that case and facing that challenge to your leadership, which is really what it was, and continuing to grow. Dara, I'd like to bring you into this conversation as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about your leadership and a little bit about your journey and how you're showing up in this space?
Sure. It's a great question. And similar to Sheerine and Tracie, I really look to my family, previous generations, to help me shape how I look at how I show up in the world of work. And my mother actually, my family is from Chester, Pennsylvania. And when my mother shared that she was interested in being a nurse, she actually had a teacher tell her, we've all heard the story, this isn't for you, you should go, you should, work in the domestic space, that kind of thing. And she decided that what I want to do is to be a nurse, and this is what I will figure out. And she ended up doing that. And my mother is a very mastermind-ish type of person. And so she did a lot of vision boards. I'm a 70s baby. When I was growing up, I would see her doing these vision boards, and one of her boards had a picture of her, and it looked like she in a meeting with a group of white men. And I said, "Mom, what is this about?" And she recognized at the time that although she was a nurse by trade, she had moved into being a public health professional, and her colleagues were white men, and she had to give herself permission to show up similarly to CWIP's vision, boldly, and advocate for herself. And so having that as a beacon for me, but then also knowing that my grandmother lost her husband at age 35, and he was a barber. She was 35. He was 35 when he passed away, and they had 5 children. And she had a 4th grade education, and she had to figure out how to navigate life with 5 young children and move into a space that actually helped them become who they ended up becoming. Now, very professional in their own professional industries. But I say that to say that it's not the profession that matters, it's your work ethic and how you show up and how you're able to do that in an authentic way. I've often asked myself, who am I? So earlier in my career, I would have said, I'm a mother, I'm a nonprofit, executive, I'm a volunteer, I'm a mentor. But today, my answer is I am a Black woman. That is who I am. And that is the lens through which I look at everything. It is the lens through which I make decisions. It is the way that I show up. And initially in my career, I almost allowed myself to go down the path where I would sort of just almost apologize for being in the room. And similar to Tracie, I was often the youngest person. I was often the only African American and only woman in different spaces. And that was very uncomfortable for me. However, I now view that really as a gift, because I have decided that my gift is the fact that I actually give a damn about other people and helping them figure out how to realize their potential, because I had to figure it out for myself. And so that it almost opens up, I know I will no longer question my ability to show up authentically as who I am. Years ago, I figured out that I almost live in the question. I'm always asking, what if we, how might we? I'm always asking those questions on behalf of other people. And I think being an empathetic person, sometimes it can drain your energy, but sometimes it also fuels you, because you're realizing that the work that you do, the work that I do, is not about me. It's about the larger community. It's about the way that I can look at the fact that I am a mother and I have raised, I'm biased, I know, she's an amazing 22-year-old, activated, fearless young lady. And I did that. There's no book to read, right? There's no book on leadership. There are books on motherhood, but the things that you do innately through your intuition is what I think is where you find the magic. And so I have allowed myself to continually live in the question and ask, what would it look like if we did this, or how might we do that for the benefit of our community? The work that we do here is so centered on women of color, not only those who we serve, but those we employ, right? And so I'm looking at myself when I look at the thousands of individuals that we are really honored to serve. I am really, really thankful for people like Barbara Bowman, she has personal connections to Chicago Child Care Society, personal and professional connections to our organization. So I'm always drawing on, I believe in finding mentors where they show up. And so I'm always drawing on nuggets of information and inspiration that will continue to fuel me in my work. And I'll just close out by saying that I have often tried to not be perceived as an angry Black woman. However, this year, I have had to give myself the gift of being an angry Black woman. I think that there is power in that, and that our society, Black or not, deserves that level of passion, right? So the collective grief that we're experiencing needs to be matched with that fuel in order to make the changes that I know we're here to talk about, and that we need to see prayerfully in this lifetime.
Dara, honey, you just gave a word. And I'm trying to process it all and break it down. And I have a couple of thoughts. So I have to, invoke my mom, because we've talked about this identity as a Black woman. And my mother was the first person when I was a little girl, long before Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw coined the phrase intersectional feminism or intersectionality. My mother said to me, listen, about herself. She says, I'm Black, I'm fat. She was she said this. I didn't call my mama fat. She called herself that. And she says, I'm a woman. And that's the only thing that people see about me. That is the only thing. When I walk into a room, when I walk down the street, that's all they see about me, and it's biased. And so she said to me what I'm sure all your mothers, grandmothers, and many of the women represented here today said to them: your work ethic matters. Be impeccable, do a good job for the sake of the good job, because she knew you wouldn't always be celebrated, you wouldn't always be applauded. And so she kind of fortified me. And I know that the women that are here today and the women who are members of CWIP fortified you in a way so that you could brace yourself, or so that you could take what was coming. She knew what was coming. Certainly I didn't, as a little girl. Felicia didn't know what was coming, but she knew what was there. And so one of the things, so you said a lot. One, it made me think about the book. As a parent, it's like what to expect when you're expecting. I was thinking about the book, what to expect when you're a Black woman or a woman of color leading, because honey, that's a whole book by itself. The other thing that you made me think about, and I want to ask this question, is about advocating for yourself. And this notion about, an angry Black woman, or an angry Latina, or fiery Latina, or all of these, pejoratives that people put on us. And we saw this play out. Many people saw this play out on national television last night in the presidential debate, where you have a Black woman, an intersectional Black woman, but whoever the world sees as a Black woman, being overtalked by a white male. And I was sitting there thinking, how many meetings have you been in where this has happened to you? Like, this could have been any corporate setting, any place, any public sector meeting perhaps, or certainly when I was at the Chicago Police Department, for sure, meeting. How often has that happened where you are being overtalked, and yet to defend yourself, to speak up, or to clarify the point would be viewed as negative on your part, but not the bad behavior that's being demonstrated by the man. So I don't know which one of y'all wants to jump in here. Tracie's nodding, so I'm gonna throw it over to Tracie Hall. Tracie.
Well, I mean, I think it's like what we see and experience every day is exactly that, right? It is exactly this idea of, being out for the count, but and being counted out before you begin. I remember this year I was named executive director of the American Library Association, which is nearly 150 years old. And I always say to people, when they call in the Black woman, or when they call in the Black girl, you already know what time it is. It is because there's a need for a paradigm shift. It's because there is a need for credibility. It is because there is a need, for direct and personal touch, because there is a need for, I think, a certain type of relentlessness. And I think for me, it is because I think that we cannot dance around certain issues. For me, it's the issue of universal broadband. And at the American Library Association, that's what we're fighting for. Among the many things that we're fighting for, we understand that attendant to the right to read today is access to a free and ubiquitous internet. We have so many studies that are telling us that, and we see it every day, that more and more jobs, especially right now, and not only the pandemic, but also the recession that's attendant to the pandemic, where more jobs go offline. They're going to go digital. They're going to go outside of you won't be able to, for service jobs or gig jobs, you won't be able sometimes to, access a palpable, tangible, visible network. And we know that a lot of times what you're talking about is who gets the nod, well, come on in and let me introduce you, let me sponsor you, let me support you, let me vouch for you. A lot of times I think women and women of color. And definitely I can speak to your, to what your mom said, being someone who has been overweight my entire life, being someone in terms of colorism who is dark, being someone who also doesn't, and this is another piece, I've never felt like I needed to adopt an affect of whiteness. So a lot, my aesthetics, like the background, what I call on is really African, part of the African diaspora and in the African continuum. So while people are talking about, their wonderful trips to, wherever, like you named your European countries, I love to travel, so I've been to those, but I'm also talking about different parts of the continent. I'm talking about time in different countries in Africa, or I'm talking about the artists, Black artists, artists of color. I owned an art gallery and I specialized in people of color, Black and Latinx communities. And so my aesthetics, my frame of reference also that I bring into a professional workplace that's considered to be canonical often reference the cultural production and the intellectual production of people of color. And I haven't been able to rely on how I look, or that I was safe, or being cute, or being pretty. My family looked at me and said, you're going to have to work, and you're going to have to work hard. And a lot of times you're going to have to work, and people are going to either discredit your work or try to take credit for your work, or they are going to listen to what you say. Somebody else is going to say it, and they're going to be valued and validated for saying what you just said. But work anyway. And I think in some ways, and I can't wait to hear what Sheerine and Dara have to say about this, but I think in some way, and I'm not saying that we need to just be long suffering, right? We know that trope. That trope is fed to us until we die, literally, right? Because of it. But I come from the Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde was a librarian, and I say that if I'm any kind of librarian, she became a librarian in 1961. I say if I'm any kind of librarian, I'm an Audre Lorde librarian. Audre Lorde talked about power and how we use it, and I understand the value of my power. In fact, each day as I find more and more and more to be indignant about, to celebrate, I find my power growing. Each time a baby is born in the village, and to my friends, each time I sit, with some of my colleagues, and, if they're working from home, their child peeks their head up, to the screen. I'm like, that's why we're working. We're working. And, so I just want to say that I feel like some of the things that we were told to be embarrassed about, or that we thought was counted, I feel like we can draw our power from. And this, what we must do, I think, at this particular time, is we must imagine the world that we are working to create is just within our grasp. That's what Barbara Bowman did, right? She created the world, and she still, her birthday is October 30th, I know. And, in her 90s, she sees that world as tangible. And so do I. I see a world about equity. And let me just say this, and I know I'm taking too much time, but stop playing around race. First of all, check yourself. People are here on this call, and you are saying, well, it's a hard choice to make, in this election. And I'm not talking about politics here, I'm talking about how in this country we dance with racism. I mean, racism to the point that people are being erased and killed and encumbered in a way that we are talking as if, well, this is about political correctness. This is not. This is about life or death. And I want to talk about that at some point, maybe not in this conversation, but for women, we have to stop underselling our power. Our power has allowed us to collude with people and with things and with movements that are robbing people of their very livelihoods. And we cannot hide from that. We have to have a frank conversation about women's power and how either we hold up or we can resist a discourse that is about that has the kind of polarity that we have today. So,
Tracie, you said more than a word, and you made me think about one of Audre Lorde's quotes, right, around, and it connects to what Dara said about this kind of like righteous anger, this moment that we have, and we have a right to that anger. But the Audre Lorde quote I'm thinking about is where she says, if you're not vocal about your pain, they will kill you and say that you enjoyed it, right? And so in this moment, all of us, so in this moment, there is great pain and the expectation that women should just grin and bear it, that we should not rise up and claim what is rightfully owed to us from an equity standpoint. And this is all of us. And the notion that the pain that my sister, and when I say sister, I'm meaning, because I'm talking to everybody in this audience. If I see my sister in pain and I believe somehow I'm going to be shielded from that same pain, well, COVID-19 has just snatched all the edges and let everybody know that this inequity, there is enough of it to go around. This house that was built on inequity is coming into doors that it has never hit before. And so there was a time in our history where it was okay for us to move ahead without all of our sisters. You know, let's go back to suffragists. Let's go back to women fighting for the right to vote, and Black suffragists working blood, sweat, and tears, but being left on the side because it was expedient. It was politically expedient. There can never be a movement. There can never be another time where we say some women's lives, some women's values, some women's work, some women's pain. Like, we have to be crystal clear about this. I had a conversation with someone yesterday, that old adage about, well, don't talk about how much you make. Yeah, because they wanted to keep you underpaid. So we have to push against all the tricks that were designed to keep women really in these really small places. I think Barbara said something about the life being extremely constrained, right? So these lives, all of our lives were and margin by degrees, right? So white women were being constrained, and women of color were being constrained, and Black women in a particular different rate, but all of us were being constrained. And so the fact that, you know, CWIP and that women are working and encouraging women to work and figuring out the ways in which we're connected and how we can build it all together. But anyway, I didn't mean to go all there. Dara, you started this conversation with or you started this part of it around the anger and this kind of like righteous anger. And we've been talking about our intersectional identities. And there's a question from the audience too about leadership qualities being gendered, right? I think, and this is from Michelle Morales, who we love. Hi, Michelle. And how can we push back on this concept? So it's one of those things where girls or women are called, you know, if we're our leadership skills, we're called pushy or bossy, and men are described as go-getter or some of those other kind of like positive attributes. How can we push against that narrative? And I want to add another part to Michelle's question, which is, and in so doing, we understand, and you said something, Tracie, that really stuck with me in our pre-call about being both creator and destroyer. So one of the things that resonates with me is that I recently read, you know, that I'm the villain in someone's story. So I'm a Black woman leader. I'm leading in a way that is bold and audacious. And that wrinkles some people's sensibility, right? So one, how do we push back on the narrative? And then combined with that, how do we get comfortable with the idea that everybody's not gonna, you know, we're not gonna be liked, I guess, by everyone. So Dara, I'll go to you, then Sheerine, and then circle back to Tracie.
Great question. Felicia, I remember years ago, I went at a previous organization, I spoke to my supervisor, and I acknowledged that I wanted to have a conversation with the new CEO. He had just come to the organization, and I really wanted to talk about my interest in being a nonprofit, a well-respected nonprofit leadership executive. That I knew that at my early 20s, I wanted to change lives, right? I was working on the east side of Detroit. And she told me that I was being seen throughout the organization at that time as being too aggressive. And I thought, well, I'm sorry. Nobody can represent Dara Toyin to a CEO the way Dara Toyin can represent herself. And so that really stuck with me because she was a Black woman. And I had to realize the generational difference and what she had to do to get to where she was, right? There were few people around that she could even call and say, can you make this introduction for me? One Black woman to another, can you do this for me? So I had to not be the victim, right? Not make her a villain and not tell her story. I had to recognize the plight that she had, but I still went and made an appointment with the CEO. Like, I was like, okay, people can see me as aggressive and I'm gonna have to be okay with that, but I care about the work that we are doing in a way that takes me outside of this organization, right? So I think, Felicia, and I know what you're speaking of is going on social media around, no matter how good you are, you will always be the villain in somebody else's story. And I firmly believe if you are authentic in who you are and you agree to always take the next right step, who cares if you're a villain? You are doing what you are called to do. You are living on purpose. And you're right. Everybody will not like it. Everybody will not like you as an individual. It's okay, because one of the four agreements is it's not personal. It's not personal to Felicia or to Tracie or to Sheerine. It is just not personal. But you have to be convicted in standing in your truth. And then I also think as women in place of influence, right? We are all, everybody in CWIP has a platform upon which they can make decisions about somebody else's professional life. Let's just agree not to participate in the gendered descriptions of what we know to be true about ourselves. I refuse to participate in it. If somebody wants to do a thing and somebody else kind of feels like they're being aggressive, let her be aggressive, because I want her to do that thing that she is called to do. So I just don't want to participate. Now, I don't say that I'm not a Pollyanna. I know that there are realities to this life, and there are constructs, and there are ways that institutions are set up to hold you back, regardless of where you come from. I get that is the reality, but I also think that we are at a place of reckoning and being unapologetic. And if you hear children, we have children, 3 and 4 year olds up here. So if you hear that background noise, that is those are our children coming out of the classroom. But I firmly believe that we have to just own the space within which that we operate in, and be unapologetic about how we navigate that, and then agree that we are the foundation. There is a fabric to society that women carry, and we have to do it unapologetically. So within every space that we have influence and that we can operate, just agree to not participate in the foolishness.
Well, I hope
that
somebody's tweeting and tweeted some of what Dara just said, because it needs to be a caption on a t-shirt. Sheerine, can you add here, talk about, the challenges and the opportunities?
It's hard to add. There's so much amazing things that have already been said, but I've been thinking a lot about this quote that you shared with us, Felicia, about being the villain in somebody else's story, and I really appreciate that. It's been sitting with me a lot in the last week, and it brought to mind, actually, at Healing to Action, we do these 101s on gender-based violence and what it means, educating community members to really understand, what is this kind of technical term, what does it mean? And we actually do this thought experiment with community members, where I will draw a box on a piece of butcher paper, and I'll ask people to think, okay, I want you to imagine that I am an alien and I just landed on the planet Earth, and in order to not blow my cover, because nobody can know I'm an alien, I've been delivered to Earth in the image of a, quote, good girl. So I look like a good girl, but I don't know what that means, and I need you to help me. I need you to help me, because I don't know, and tell me what I need to do. And then you have the group brainstorm and think about, what does that mean? And it's always the same answers, being kind, being empathetic, being sweet, smiling, laughing, being obedient, being polite, being calm, being patient. So we put this list together, and then I ask them, okay, I'm going to try to do all these things, but if I'm not doing this right, what are some words I might expect to hear, so that I can sort of try to continue to do this right, and be aware that I'm not doing this right. And it's always the same words, and we put those words outside of the box that we've drawn on the piece of butcher paper, and you can imagine what some of them are, but unlikable, angry, difficult, crazy, and then of course a whole long list of words that I won't say here, but we've all heard them. We've all been subject to them. And so we talk about how that's what gender-based violence is. That actually what it is it's using words, it's using attitudes and behaviors to put us into a box, to deprive us of being our most authentic selves, to deprive us of being all of the things, all of the multitudes that we hold. And it's really interesting because oftentimes the first thing people feel when they see this is anger, because they start to realize what's happening to them, what's happening to them every single day. But I think also, as Dara put it, it's very healing to think about this issue this way, because you realize that it's actually not personal. That it's in so much of the time when you're talking to survivors of intimate partner violence or sexual harassment or sexual assault, they're so quick to assume that it was a choice that they made. It was a bad relationship that they had, that they don't know how to get along with people, and this is why this happened to them. And it's so helpful to see that this is actually quite systemic, that this kind of violence, these words and these attitudes that are imposed on us, they're a strategy. They're a strategy to keep us in our box and to make our world as small as possible, to constrain us, as Barbara Bowman said. So I try to take, and it's funny doing gender justice work, because it's always like popping up into your face like a mirror you don't want to see, when things are happening to you in your own life and you're thinking, oh, I know that I talk to people about this every day, but when someone is telling me that I'm being too angry, or I'm being too intense. That's a big one that I get. That it's hard to remind myself, okay, this is part of a bigger picture, that this isn't about me. It's healing to remember that, to go back to this box. It's also motivating to recognize that it's not going to change this. People aren't going to stop saying this if I change my behavior. They're just going to come up with a different way of putting me back into this box or keeping me in the box. And I think that the other thing I want to say that I think hasn't been said yet is there's the angry side of it, and then there's also the other side of it, which is that I think as women of color, we can't always show our uncertainty or our doubt. We can't always be able to acknowledge the weakness, because there's so much at stake for us in acknowledging, I don't know the answer to that, or I have to think about that. We feel like we have to always be on, and we have to stand very firm in our convictions. And so I do want to also recognize that part of the breaking open these boxes is that everyone should be able to hold all of these emotions and be honored for those emotions, and those attitudes and feelings, and really thinking about what it means to show your perceived weakness, or what people associate with being a woman or being a girl, being able to show pain, being able to show fear, being able to show doubt, because ultimately being vulnerable and being able to share those feelings, that is the key to getting to the heart of the problems that we're trying to solve. Because when you're able to show your pain, it opens up a door for other people to share their stories. And it's really the stories that are the crux of how do we identify what's really going on here? What are the real solutions that we need to be pursuing? That information doesn't come through data or statistics. It comes through stories. That's how we identify the heart of the problems that we're trying to solve. And we can't get there if we're constraining ourselves and the conversations we're having by not bringing our full selves to that conversation, whether we're angry or whether we're feeling grief or whether we're feeling pain or whether we're just feeling deep doubt and uncertainty.
And Sheerine, that resonates with me, and I want to use this as an opportunity to signal this to the audience as well, and that allowing people to show the full range of their emotions, allowing a leader to show vulnerability without holding the vulnerability against her, allowing yourself to do the same thing. And so I think, we're having this conversation amongst friends, but this is for all of us, because these things that we're talking about are playing out in real workplaces. And I know this wasn't Mrs. Bowman, but her daughter, when she was at the White House, they used the women at the White House, but Valerie Jarrett led that, was to amplify what the other women had said to kind of push against that and to work together as a collective and not let their sisters stand alone against, you know, some opposition. But that vulnerability is really key. And I know for myself, there was a point, I won't say the organization, where I said to my team, it had been a full year before someone on my team, although we had acted on these really great ideas and they were really working for us, but it had been a full year before someone on that team had actually said that something that I said was a good idea. I brought it up. It hurt for a long time, and I kept thinking, like, I know we're doing it, why, but nobody's saying it. And once I shared that, like, I want you to understand how this impacts me, it kind of created an opening, right? But so being willing to be vulnerable and to share and to see and to hold up a mirror so that others can see. So if you aren't amplifying the ideas of another woman on your team, if you're not letting her know, hey sis, that was a great idea, I see you, then why are we, right? That's kind of like part of what we're required to do. Tracie, I know I wanted, because you, honey, you said that awesome thing about both being creator and destroyer, and I wanted to come back to you on that. And there are a couple of questions from the chat that I wanted to get going, get you all to think about. One is what our advice is to young professionals or new professionals in the nonprofit space. And then there was another one, I want to make sure that I covered it, because from Christy, oh yes, this is really important, especially in the sense of, so from Christy Yoshida, I know from the stats, because we follow these things, in September alone, so I started off by saying Time Magazine in January, women were leading in the workplace. COVID has happened and there have been significant job losses from women. And then this past September, nearly 1 million women left the workforce in 1 month, not necessarily related to COVID illness or their jobs being cut, but because of childcare, remote learning responsibilities as schools across the country started to come back online. And Christy's question is around women leaning out or leaning back because of all of the challenges. So I love that Dara was like, yeah, there are young people over here on the other side of this room. There's learning going on here. So Tracie, creator and destroyer, and then everyone, what's your advice for new leaders in the nonprofit space? And then let's tackle this lean back or leaning out phenomenon that's happening. You're on mute, Tracie.
Thank you. There are a lot of ideas here that are wonderful, and I hope that everyone listening will continue the conversation, take note of these questions, call somebody up, Zoom somebody up, and continue these conversations, because we're really just getting started. Like most good conversations, they kind of get started at this point. The thing I want to say, I think, about creator and destroyer is that I'm interested in meditation, and when we talk about leadership styles, one of the things that I think helped me early on in my career is that I was really known as a mediator and a facilitator, somebody who could get along with people who are really hard to get along with, who could do a lot of problem solving across groups. People would say, often that I was very cool under fire, under pressure. And how Bruce Lee says that when he first started karate, a kick was just a kick. When he got to the midway point, a kick was more than a kick. But when he got to mastery, a kick again was just a kick. And Bruce Lee says something else that is really important to me. He said to have styles to crystallize it. So around the midway point in working, I started to think, I really want to be nice. I really want to be kind. That's really important to me, empathy. And it was my meditation teacher who said, well, every creator is also a destroyer. That goes back to that idea of being the villain in someone else's story. So you have to be comfortable, if you're a creator, with what you have to break apart. And so it really took the emphasis off of me being nice. I always want to be empathetic. I always want to be fair. I always want to be just. But that's not going to always, because sometimes you have to disrupt things. So it's not going to always make people, it's not going to always have a feel good for everyone. So I would say that. But there's another thing that I want to say about about being a creator. I think at some point we want to start investing in other women's careers and in other people of color's careers and other people, wherever if there are people with disabilities, people who are sometimes, as I said, counted out before they begin. The way that I did that, when I was at Joyce, because I've been in this position too new, but I had a travel budget when I was at the Joyce Foundation, where I was before I came to the American Library Association, or came back to the American Library Association. And I looked at my travel budget and I said, I want to use at least 20% of my travel budget to bring people along. I want to bring arts and cultural administrators along. I want to pay their conference registration and pay for them to come to an event. And what I would do is that I would say to them, I would choose, do you want to attend? And it wouldn't always be people, within my sphere. I tried to make sure that I was scanning who's doing the work. And I would say, would you like to attend? They would often be like, oh my goodness, oh, I thought about that. I never thought, and I wanted to. I would ask their institutions to agree that they could attend, get the time off, and that their institutions would listen to what they learned while they were there. But I would often set up just one dinner or one lunch for just that person and I to talk about how they were feeling. Who did they want to meet was the question. And then I would make the next time that we got together only twice so they could make their own friends. But I would invite the person that they thought that they wanted to meet. A lot of times I knew them. Sometimes I had to reach out too during the conference to either to have a drink with us, to have coffee. But it is something that for me is one of the most important things that we could do, which is to take the credibility that we may have garnered in our own leadership journey and share that with someone else. A lot of times women, and especially people of color, we don't get that benefit. And as far as, and so I can close out and everybody else can speak, as far as leaning out, let's take the opportunity to create the world we want to have. I believe new businesses are going to be born. I think there's a lot of entrepreneurship that is needed. In Chicago, we don't have the creative business density that we need. So let's create the kind of city we want to live in, and let's create the kind of businesses that honor the fact that we are intersectional as women.
Well, Tracie, I'm getting a sign that we have to wrap up. So you're going to have to be the last word. I think that that was thank you for combining all of those questions into one and providing some insight into how all of us can help new leaders in the space navigate, and then also the push for equity and expanding what work looks like so that women don't have to lean out. And now, thank you all, Sheerine, Dara, Tracie. We could go for another hour. I know we could. Thank you all so much. And I'm going to turn it back over to Jackie.
Well, thank you, all of you. And I'd like to encourage us all to take a breathe in what Felicia and Dara and Sheerine and Tracie have gifted us with. And I believe that they are calling each of us to ask of ourselves, what is your commitment as a leader and as a change agent? And for us at CWIP, our vision is to create an equitable, inclusive, and connected social sector. And I'd like to acknowledge Marika Ramos, who founded the Racial Equity and Social Justice Committee of CWIP after 2016 election. And think about her intention starting this work for seeing us that we are all on. And we would like each of you to make a commitment out of the space that these women have created for us today. We want you to think about Barbara's legacy and Joan and the women that we've heard from and the women that have come before us and men. CWIP is about creating change agents who develop their leadership and then they go back to their organizations, to their boards, to their committees, to their volunteers, to their families. And we want this program to move you to step up to the next level of leadership. What that looks like. Whatever level of leadership you hold, you are leading and you have capacity. And this is about women driving change, anybody here. And we want you to let this fuel you to speak up, to say the next thing in that committee meeting that perhaps you would not have said yesterday. Say it. And we want to challenge you now as we close to really ask yourselves, to what are you committed and where will you take this? And I don't know if people can literally say, to what are you committed and what will you step into? And say it and breathe it and feel it, because this world needs it and this city needs it. So with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Deborah Walker Johnson.
Well, you've heard about all of the fantastic work CWIP is doing, and Jackie just led the charge for you to get involved. So now it's time for action. Whether you're new to the field or an experienced professional, CWIP is for you. If you are not a member, I encourage you to join by visiting our website at cwiponline.org. Also, if you wish to be considered for CWIP's board, we will start taking nominations in the spring. So again, pay attention to our website. Please note, however, that prior involvement in CWIP committee work is strongly encouraged before you submitting your board nomination. So be sure to sign up for a committee today. Now, for the next half hour, several of our board members will be hosting networking sessions to allow you to share your insights, meet new people, and learn more about CWIP's committees. So to join us, all you have to do is just to click the icon at the bottom of your screen. So I'd like to thank our sponsors again and thank you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day.